Hello and welcome. Glad to have you back with us here in the On Book, the Old Globe Shakespeare Reading Group. Thanks again. My name is Danielle Mages-Amato. I'm the literary manager and dramaturg at the Globe. Thank you for your patience as we worked our way through all of our exciting technological issues this morning. So that was great. But we're very excited to be back talking about Taming of the Shrew. And this week we're going to continue talking about the Shrew with actors, because I think if you want to talk to someone who's read Shakespeare closely, you really want to talk to an actor. These are people who've wrestled with every last syllable of the text to find a way to make it make sense to themselves and to an audience. So I'm very pleased to be joined. Let me see if I can get, ta-da! I'm very pleased to be joined today by Jono Roberts. Hello. If you guys are longtime Globe audience members, you've seen Jono in several plays at the Globe, including Shrew and The Tempest in the same summer that he did Shrew, in which you played Caliban, yes? Yes. And then he came back for another year to do Much Ado About Nothing. Jono, in addition to film and television, his Broadway credits include Take Me Out, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, but he's also done Shakespeare and classic plays across the U.S., including playing Iago in the Shakespeare Theater in D.C. and roles in King Lear and Richard II, The Goodman, and ART. So thank you, Jono, so much for being here. Welcome, welcome.
Hello, thank you. It's nice to be back, sort of. I like to think of the Old Globe a little bit as a home. It's a home.
Wonderful. Well, it's glad to have you back with us. I'd love to hear, I can see comments from the folks who are watching in the sidebar. And if you saw that production, I'd love to hear from you. And please start asking your questions. I'll start asking Jono some questions, but we'd really love to hear your as you're watching. So as a lot of folks in this group are coming sort of reading The Taming of the Shrew on the page for the first time, I'm wondering if you remember when you've read the play for the first time, and I'm curious if your opinion has changed over the years from reading it to being in it to today.
Yeah, my experience of the play, I guess, really in high school, we discussed a little bit of it. I think we probably discussed the ending in high school. And everyone decided it was a rotten play. And then I forgot about it. And then several years later, I played Petruchio for the first time in Dallas, in Texas, with Richard Hamburger. And we did a great, fun production. It was a little more in the traditional Shrew play, where I would sweep her up over my shoulders and spank her bum and all that kind of sort of madcap craziness that I think, dates back 400 years or so of Petruchio being this sort of violent madman, and none of the play making sense. Then I think I really read the play for the first time when we did it at the Globe, working with Ron Daniels, who was our director, who is truly just one of the most brilliant textualists that I've worked with. We read the play and actually looked at it as if it was a play that we didn't know, we hadn't read before, and discovered a much more interesting piece of theater and a much more interesting piece of humanity than I knew existed there. But it took an actual closer. There's so much tradition that accumulates to these pieces that sometimes you forget there's actually words underneath them, and that the words have meanings, and that we can forget what people have been saying for all this time. And we really looked at it with fresh eyes when we did it at the Globe. And yeah, I was amazed by what it was actually about.
What were some of the things you would say you discovered on that close read?
The fact that, I don't know, I mean, depending on people's familiarity, there is a very famous Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor production film where Petruchio when the first time I did it, someone sent me his whip. that there was a tradition that Petruchio used to always carry a bullwhip, so they sent me the whip for me to use in the show. I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. But in the play, he is absolutely at pains to point out that he would never lay a finger on Kate, that he would never, in fact, that all of his sort of rage and extremity back in, God, where is it, Padua, where he comes from? I always call it Tora Bora. All the sort of that rage and madness back there is always aimed at people that are doing things. He says it'll all be done in reverent care of her, that nothing is good enough for her. So she's come from a world where people won't people like recoil as soon as she opens her mouth and treat her like dung. And then he takes her to a place where he says, I'll lose my mind on everyone because nothing will be good enough for her. So there is craziness and violence. She beats her sister, he beats everyone around her, but it's all done to show that that she's worthy of so much more, which is something that I'd never seen done or never sort of read. I'd never understood that from the play. There's lots of things like that. When he first arrives in, where is it set? Verona? God, some Italian town. When he first arrives, Hortensio, his best friend, is the first person he sees. And Hortensio says, my God, what are you doing here? He says, my dad's finally died, so I'm getting to leave home for the first time to see the world and hopefully marry rich because we're broke. But he's leaving home for the first time ever, apart from to go to school with Hortensio. And so all of this bluster about being this great warrior and general and traveler and all of his sort of machismo bullshit is lying, and he's lying to the other men of that town. And people have, again, historically, people had bought that interpretation of the role that, oh yeah, he's this great wandering generalissimo kind of guy. It's like, no, he's literally just left home for the first time. He's
What
never
do you
met a woman.
What do you think is behind some of that? Some of those layers that have come onto the play over the years. Some of those. Why do you
Misogyny.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I really think it's a fantasy that's been attached to the play, a fantasy of violence against women. Look, here I am. I'm a 45-year-old man talking about this, and so okay, I'm coming from Petruchio's point of view. Just as if you get me talking about Othello, I'll tell you what an asshole Othello is. I played Iago, so that's that's my take on the play. So I
Actors
will
have
be
their biases. We know.
Yeah. I think now you probably know more about this than I do, but there was a tradition of the shrew plays and of the what do they call it? The something ride, where where someone was had a shrewish wife, a bossy or not loud wife. There would be a thing in the village where everyone come into their house, take her out on a rail, beat the husband up. And I've forgotten what the hell it was called. But there's a tradition of violent shrew rituals. And there was a tradition of shrew plays where just that thing would happen, where the woman would get her comeuppance, generally by being beaten, sort of, very, yeah, these, the English Punch and Judy still goes on. So it came from a tradition. And I think that people kept interpreting the play within that tradition. And I think Bill's just more interesting than that. It's like when he wrote Hamlet. Oh, sorry, when he wrote The Tempest, he set up a classic Jacobean revenge tragedy and then turned it into a play about forgiveness. And I think in this play, he sets up a classic shrew, woman beating, crush this person play and turns it into something far more complex and perhaps difficult and human. And I think we didn't catch up. And I also, and depending on how deep we want to get into the play, I think it all comes down to the sun moon scene.
To the supper scene?
So to the sun, moon, the old
Well, let's
man. This
talk
is the
more about
sun.
that scene. What was that something, was that a piece? I'm curious about the process of rehearsing it and going to that, say, let's say that particular scene and what the journey of sort of discovery was working your way
God,
through
it
that scene
seems
with Ron and Emily.
it's hell. It's really weird. So, to backtrack, all right. So when he first arrives and he's first going to meet Kate before the what they call the flighting scene, he says, if she looks sad, I'll say how happy she looks. If she's angry, I'll say what a sweet thing she is. If she's hideously ugly, I'll say how beautiful she is. So he just sets up this thing that I'm going to play this game of opposites. They go to Tora Bora. He does the whole falconry thing with the watching and the again really important in that scene in that sequence. She doesn't sleep, so he doesn't sleep. She doesn't eat, so he doesn't eat. He's torturing both of them, and this goes back to this old um, falconry technique because he's never met a woman in his life. He doesn't know what to do, and so so there's the scene with the tailor where he says at the end of the tailor scene, that the dress is not good enough for her. It's all shit. And he says, then we will not leave. Next time you see them, they're on the road. So right
Hmm.
there, something has happened off stage that has meant that they will leave. So there's been some
Hmm.
kind of off stage, who knows what, but they're off. So then they're on the road, and he says, look at the moon. She says, no, it's the sun. And there's this weird line, and now this is 10 years ago. Weird line, and where she goes, fine, it's the bloody moon, and he says, no, but I say it is the moon, and she says, oh, I get it. So when you say it's the moon, it's the moon. When you say it's the sun. And I've never quite figured out the lines. I've never quite figured out how it shifts. But Hortensio sees it. He's like, oh my God, you've like, go thy way. The battle's won or whatever his line is. But something has shifted. Not where she's just accepted, fine, it's the bloody moon, it's the sun. Where she actually goes, oh, I get
Hmm.
it. You can say things or anything. You can
Hmm.
literally say anything and have it just be true. He's like, yeah, well, like basically that, yes, that's what I do. I'm a moron. Um, I feel like Petruchio and Edmund and King Lear are cousins because they have that same way of conjuring the world up before them. Um, and so somehow she wins.
Hmm.
Well, he goes, yes, you've got the game. Then the old man arrives and he says, oh, look at this young woman, and she takes the game. She gets the game and then takes it
Hmm.
further than Petruchio does, or further than he can. She says, yes,
Hmm.
not only are you a lovely young woman, imagine how fortunate the man is who will have you as his bride on their wedding night. So she jumps to sex and the result of this saying things game. And Petruchio can't go there. He's like, stop, 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 stop. Okay, hi, old man. Nice to meet you. So she beats
Hmm.
him at his own game. Next time the game is played, and I do think it's an extension of the game. So now we know she's better at it than him.
Hmm.
They go to the wedding. The wedding is had. They're sent off to the other room. She's stuck with two of the most hideous people on the planet, the widow and her awful sister Bianca. A room she desperately wants to get out of. Uh, there's the game of send for your wife, she won't come, send for your wife, she won't come. Then Petruchio sends for Kate. Now, if we assume from the sun moon scene that not only is she just as smart as him and they're
Hmm.
on the same page, she's actually smarter than him.
Hmm.
Of course, she'll quite naturally be like, what's going on here? What is this? And she comes out, she says, what do you want? And again, they're back in the town that they're from, where she has never been able to talk. Every time I remember, there's one scene where she just starts
Hmm.
to say something, and is it Gremio? like just shrieks and runs away. Like, no, I can't hear. Like she says something completely reasonable. He's like, I don't know what she's doing. I don't understand these sounds coming out of her face. Um, and so Petruchio says, why don't you talk for a bit? And she's in a town where she's never been able to talk. And so she starts to talk, and she takes this I can say one thing and mean the other thing game and drives it into I think, a level of complexity of, I mean this, I don't mean this, I absolutely don't mean this, however, I do mean this. She goes back into the sex thing again. Now, remember, this is a couple that are married but still haven't consummated their marriage. She starts, it's an incredibly sexy speech. Um, Everyone is silent while she has the biggest speech in the play, and then they bugger off with all the money. And
Right.
I kind of feel like that sun moon scene is so important in setting up that final speech and showing that she is smarter than him. And I think in that final speech, she weaves a web of, do I mean that? I mean that, but I certainly don't mean that. That has left the audiences for 400 years thinking that she's either means it, which she clearly doesn't,
Mhm.
or she's traumatized and is a sort of the
Mhm.
Stepfordized wife, which I can't see. I can't see from the way she's written. I totally
Mhm.
understand it, and I think that the reaction against that, the language, and put your hand beneath your husband's foot, your husband is your lord, all that kind of stuff. I think that the reaction against those lines is very strong. I think people want to be like, absolutely no way.
Mhm.
She's clearly been destroyed. But I do think there's that deeper, oh, I can say anything
Mhm.
and no one will really know what I mean apart from the guy I'm talking to.
Mhm.
Or at least he will know that he has no idea what I mean. Everyone else will think they know, but Petruchio's sitting there going, oh, you bloody tart. I don't know who you are right now, but it's really sexy. It's really fun.
I think that's a
So,
really fascinating and interesting line to draw through the play. And when you talk about him never having sort of been out of his hometown and never having sort of seen women before, I think there's also something in what you said about that she had never really been seen before. That
yeah,
she had been in a place where she couldn't be seen and she couldn't be heard. And here comes this person along who suddenly sees her and hears her in a way that maybe other people have never seen or heard her before.
exactly. And I think the irony, one of the other ironies of it, is that um, he's the only man in the play.
What do you
And
mean by
using a traditional, very cis idea of
that?
masculinity, he's the only genuinely. Um, I mean, this is so 50s. He's the only person that's man enough for her.
Hmm.
I think that he's, yeah. I hope I don't not offend anyone with that statement, but I think in that old sense, he's the other men in Verona or wherever the hell it is are so obsessed with what they own and how they look, and they're sucked in by Bianca, by the externality of this perfect white girl, the ideal girl that everyone's in love with, who's actually she's she just sort of simpers to her dad, and she's very manipulative, very she's not a good person, and they don't see Kate, whereas Petruchio, for all of his bravado about being the real man, actually kind of is the. When I remember sitting and watching the play, from backstage, and looking at it being like, God, none of them are actual blokes. I'm a rugby playing guy from New Zealand. I mean, right now I'm out in the bush, and I spend my time fishing and making bread because it's the lockdown, and I'm a very cis man who happens to, you know, like poetry. Um, And I kind of like that. I see Petruchio, I'm like, oh yeah, he's totally a bloke. He's a guy, and the other guys are not. They're little city bitches.
Well, a little bit what I hear when you're set. I'm not going to take that up. A little bit what I hear when you're talking, though, is that there's a courage. There's a certain kind of courage and a fearlessness to disregard social pressures that perhaps both of them share. And he might be more rewarded for it, and she might be more punished for it. But they both have that capacity to say, I don't care what you think of me. I'm going to show up at my wedding in this crazy outfit, or I'm going to, listen to the person everyone else says I shouldn't listen to because I don't care what they think. I'm going to sort of be in my own line. And perhaps that's something that connects them as they discover this about each other through the play.
Yeah, her femininity and his masculinity are both exceptionally well matched. That's why I kind of feel like they're the happiest couple in Shakespeare. As time goes, in a few years, there'll be a lot of smashed plates and a lot of babies.
So tell me more about Kate's awful sister Bianca. I'd love to hear more about your impressions of that character.
Well, I think it's interesting that the only woman that gets beaten in the play is Bianca by Kate. And because I'm totally Team Kate, I think she deserved it.
I think that Brie Welch, who played Bianca in your production, might be in our group. So hi, Brie.
Is Brie there?
Please post a comment. No, I'm just joking. Go ahead.
Oh my God, I hope she's there. Where are you, woman? She's like the best. She's the best. I miss her. And I wanted to say that as a sidebar. I mean, the cast we had that year is just some of my favorite people. I love them. Jay Whittaker and Michael Stewart Allen and Brie. Oh God, all these lovely people. Where were we?
So we were talking about Bianca. Speaking of Brie.
Oh, Bianca. I mean, I think there's that discovery that people have, the men have. They fetishize this woman so much. And again, like what I was saying about gender and gender roles, right now in my mind has tucked itself into the mind of that play and that performance. And I think that, so I don't necessarily think any of the things I'm saying. I think that she is, again, I think that she presents a fantasized version of femininity for these men. She's, again, the name Bianca, she's white, she's pure, she's angelic, she's my mind, it always goes to things that I really shouldn't say. She's schoolgirly and essentially a sort of pedophile dream. You can imagine Bianca will always have teddy bears, and the men that love her will just think that's the cutest thing in the world. And there's a sickness in that I hate.
Well, being the fantasy and living the fantasy is not good for anyone. I mean, that's not a healthy gender role to sort of completely embrace and play your gender role can be as damaging to the person who plays it well. Here we've got a question from the people watching. I don't know if you can see this on the screen here, Jono. Do you think Bianca is similar to Kate, who plays the game better? They share a lot of common text, but Bianca knows how to flatter people and Kate chooses not to.
I think it's absolutely true. And I think that's the thing. Bianca is playing the game. And I think Kate's just thinks the game is nonsense and doesn't understand why people are doing it. And which again, I say everything from Petruchio's standpoint, makes Kate honest and Bianca a dirty liar.
All right, we're gonna have to have Brie on after this too. But it makes Bianca successful in this world, and Kate a failure. Which is neither one is a good choice because there's no good choice. You can play the game or not play the game, and neither one is going to really, really, truly work because the game is rigged.
Yeah. it's the game is totally rigged, and that's kind of the joy of the end of the play, is that for me, that Kate and Petruchio twist the game and end up winning, taking all the winnings.
Hmm.
We leave with all the money. But you see in that final wedding scene when suddenly it's revealed that Bianca isn't this pure sweet thing. She's actually very much um, she's more of a quote unquote shrew than Kate is. You do not, you do not see a happy marriage ensuing because she's married to these sort of simpering idiots that just have chased the pretty girl you know, because of their sexual predilections, as opposed to Petruchio, who had a much more noble need to just get money out of it. Um,
Well, here we've got another comment I'll put up here. How would you describe how Petruchio's changed from the way he starts out, saying all he wants is a rich wife? Do you feel that there's a
oh
change
yeah,
there, that he learns to want more than that, or do you think that he's still sort of, he gets a rich wife, success?
yeah. No, I think that the he is. God, I wish I knew. I think it's supported in the story text, not necessarily. And again, this is the stuff that one interprets, and this is all interpretation from me, um, as opposed to anything he says. But I think that, um, yeah. So he's never met a woman in his life. He doesn't know what the hell to do, and he wins out astonishingly with this person who is, as I said, I mean, I think that he is a fascinating person. He's been sheltered and probably, had a fairly strange life back in Tora Bora. Um, I just always imagine that his place is just this sort of strange mountain hovel, and that's why Tora Bora is stuck. That he drags him back to
Oh my.
iron beds and guards. Um, uh, uh, I think he has met his equal and his genuine partner. And I think that that is an astonishing thing.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the shift, see, the woman that I've been married to for the last almost 20 years is an is absolutely a Kate. We've certainly had our share of broken crockery and love. Um, and she transformed my life completely, saved my life completely. So I can only put myself in that. Like, for me, Petruchio getting to meet Kate, I mean, he wins. That's the lottery that he wins, and I think he's utterly transformed by that connection to another human being.
How would
It's funny.
you,
I
I
just
mean,
that spent the last year. Oh, sorry. No, I
please
spent
go
the
ahead.
last year playing a very similar, very very different storyline, but in the Cursed Child, the Harry Potter play, where I was playing Draco Malfoy, an adult Draco Malfoy, who has met a woman who completely transforms him.
Hmm.
And then he loses. So it's, yeah, I'm in that mindset as well. But I think the potential shift that can occur by connecting to another human being is measureless, and I think that's what Petruchio gets.
I'm bringing here another comment that there's ultimately no mother figure in Kate and Bianca's story. Bianca is the ultimate daddy's girl and relates to the other men as daddy. Kate is more of a woman separate from her identity as daughter or sister.
Oh yeah, I mean
And that
that's
makes me want to ask you about like how Petruchio relates to the other men in the story. Do you feel that he has connections or relationships, or is he also sort of apart from his connections from with them as other men? Or you can comment on that comment. I didn't want to take away your ability to
oh
comment
god,
on that comment.
I think it's a terrific comment, and I think if one wrote an essay on the mothers in Shakespeare, it would be a very short essay.
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah, they are both motherless. Um, uh, and you're absolutely right. Bianca has played into that family role, and Kate has just gone, great. I'm done. I'm out of here. Her father treats her like shit, and she's like, yeah, great, fine. You guys suck. Um, It's interesting. Yeah, neither of them are particularly attached to family or family roles, um, which which gives them this sort of wonderfully exciting blank slate in terms of how to shape and form their own marriage. Um, I think, as I said before, I think that I think that Petruchio's relationship to the other men in the play is God. I wish I could read this play objectively. I think, yeah, I think that he sees them as twats. Excuse me, that's not an American word, is it? Sorry, it's in New Zealand. He sees them as absolute fools,
Hmm.
utter fools, because with the yeah, I think he Hortensio is his old school friend,
Hmm.
and there's love and affection left from that. Um, and I think Hortensio is a very entertaining character, and I think that yeah, he's Petruchio's mate.
Well, I mean, I
But I
think
think
in a literal way, the other men in the play are fools or they are clowns.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I
they're
wonder if
absolute
there's
clowns.
something that you, as actors, when doing the play, we've talked a little bit to Shauna Cooper, who's directing the play at the Globe this summer, about balancing clowning with the sort of realistic relationship that you sort of want
Yeah,
to have at the heart of the play, this Kate Petruchio relationship, which feels emotionally real. But then you've got these
yeah,
characters that are sort of these clowns. These other men are they're clowns. He's right. They're total clowns.
yeah.
And so I wonder if that was something that you guys dealt with, sort of trying to balance clowning versus sort of honesty, or if you feel that those aren't at odds at all.
No, I think it's absolutely true, and I think it's not necessarily something we verbalized or discussed
Mm-hmm.
in the developing of the play. I think Ron um, had his ways of working through things, of staging scenes as the scenes that they are and letting them be what they are, rather than saying, "Okay, this is a clown scene. Let's make this a clown scene." I remember the some of the most rewarding comedy I've done on stage was when Kate and I first arrive in Tora Bora, um, with all the boys, my
Mm-hmm.
servants. There was, a lot of slapstick, and there's one little bit where with my boot being pulled off that was, it's just a classic bit, but it was done so. The Ron built it so well. We were at loggerheads because I wanted to go to, Anyway, yeah. He's a great director, um, and hang on, I had a good thought earlier on, and then I got tangled up in something else. Um, the I had this moment, I think, in the second preview that I often talk about. Actually, it's just a really good moment in my life. Um, Growing up was second preview. I'm standing at the back of the audience in the because I enter through that vom, whatever you call it, the little steps
Mm-hmm.
down. So I'm standing behind everyone, watching one of the scenes with the boys, and they're all, with the clown, the clowns, Grumio and Grimio, and it's lots of madcapery Shakespeare, and it was just exhausting. There's so much effort being put into it, and I mean, which was great, but I was in this entirely different Petruchio mindset, and they're doing their thing, and I then, that scene finishes, and I walk down the steps, turn around, land on the stage, and I looked out at all those hundreds of people in the Globe Theatre, and just had this moment where I went, "It's okay, I've got this." To them, in my mind, I said to the audience, "It's like, just come here. I'm not going to do any of that nonsense. There's going to be no, I'm not going to be jumping up and down like a lunatic. I've got you."
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of felt the audience just settle into my hand. And it's this sort of, it's interesting now that in a way it's the journey that Petruchio takes with Kate, where I've got you, you're okay. Um, and I felt the audience settle into me, and I felt me settle into the role, like for the first time. And it's actually something that shifted the way I performed ever since, where I suddenly discovered gravitas,
Wow.
I guess one would say. The ability to just go, oh,
Hmm.
I don't have to run out there and impress anyone with my silliness. I've got you. Um, and I think that was Petruchio sort of talking through me, and I think it was one of those great moments of like, oh yeah, I'm not doing the clown. I'm playing
Hmm.
an entirely different human being. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, it was really fun, really cool thing.
Well, look, I'm conscious of your time, and we're sort of at the end of our conversation. As we go, though, I want to ask you, as an actor, do you have any tips in terms of language or in terms of how to get the most or the most positive experience out of reading one of these plays, even for the first time or for the first time again in a long time?
Well, I mean, the only thing I would say that's a really worthy tip is read it out loud. It only works if you read it out loud. Um, you have to you have to feel the language going through your face bits. I mean, in terms of deeper acting technique and stuff, I think that uh, um, the How to Do Shakespeare that Adrian Noble wrote is a really good book if people are really interested in how to look at the language and how to break down the language on a very deep level. That one kind of sums up a lot of the stuff that I do. Um, uh, Two things. I ask deep questions. Why is this person talking in prose? Why is this person talking in verse? Um, and assume that that's a choice. Why has Bill got them right? Why has he got them talking in verse now? What does that mean? Um, when does someone when does someone suddenly need to use poetic language? Sometimes language
Mhm.
breaks out of its daily use, and we have something that's too big to put in words that we have to in regular words, so suddenly we have to use metaphor, and we find this in our daily lives. I mean, go through any um, more important or extreme experience, be that falling in love or being ill or what's going on now with the pandemic. In order to explain our feelings and experiences, you'll find if you just pay attention, you'll hear people constantly using metaphor and simile when they're discussing heightened
Mhm.
experiences. And so always pay attention to when are these people suddenly breaking into poetry? When are they suddenly using metaphor? When are they suddenly using and that again, it's a choice. And why is language not stretching far enough for them that they have to then break into something, a new way of expression? There's lots of clues that can be found in those sorts of things, looking actually not just at what's being said, but how is it being said. You'll learn a lot about your characters through that, and their internal life through that.
Hmm.
Um,
I
if
love
that makes
that.
sense.
Thank you so much. That's
Yeah,
incredibly helpful.
yeah,
Well, thank you. I
yeah.
can't thank you enough. Thank you for sort of channeling a little Petruchio for us today and
God,
speaking
it's
from
like a
that mindset. It's
wormhole.
incredibly helpful. It's wonderful. It's wonderful because
It was
it's
hysterical. I was suddenly like I was thinking completely Petruchio thoughts.
no, it's great because I mean, that's what you do. And I'm sure, we'll talk to Emily on Friday and we'll get her equal and opposite reaction.
She is one of the most exquisite human beings. I like working with her, doing the show with her is like absolutely one of my top 10 in my life. She's just incredible. So you
Fantastic.
guys are
Well, we'll
lucky.
pass that on to
Yeah,
her
yeah.
for sure. Thank you again. Thank all of the rest of you for watching, and we'll be back on
Thank
Friday.
you,
Goodbye.
everybody. It's
Take good
amazing.
care,
It's
Donna.
amazing. Bye bye.
Thank you so much again.